Jamar Tisby mentioned something in The Color of Compromise. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. And it's that basically there would be no black church if the white church wasn't so racist. And he's talking historically predominantly, but he carries it into the present as well. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? What would that, would there be a black church if the white church had handled things better? Or are there other factors that you would want to mention into that?
A matter of fact, I have that book as well, and I'm making my way through it, and he's bridging the gaps or filling in the gaps of some things that I had just assumed, just constantly being fed American history from a white perspective. So he fills in some gaps for me. With that, I love history. I've always loved history, and the history is my greatest. I just love history. My kids tease me and said, "Dad, you should have been a history professor." So when it comes to American history, I really love that. And so, but he filled in some gaps, and I believe I said this before on radio interviews and stuff. I said that racism. The church needs to fix this issue of racism because the church is the one who allowed it to take place in 1619. When we came over here, the church allowed for slavery to take place. And therefore, if they allowed slavery here in America, therefore, I think the church needs to fix it. And I agree with what he is saying is that there wouldn't have been any need for black churches if the white churches were not racist, if they had just embraced us. And some tried, and that's why the history of the AME Church, African Methodist Episcopal Church, came about, where there was a black guy, and he talks about it in the book. There's a black guy who was gifted and called and had white people come into the church. And so, but prior to him getting there, he was part of the white church as well. And, but, just racism just began to raise his ugly head to the point where he felt the need to separate. And that's how the AME Church got started, because of the racism in the church. He brought a guy in to speak. And they sat in the section, the white section. And see, already that's a problem. Why do we have a white section in the church? So, and then when they rushed over there and said, you guys can't sit here, this is the white section, they kept praying. They came into church to pray before the guy spoke. They kept praying and said, we're not going anywhere till we finish praying. And then some other folks came up, you can't sit here. And then finally it got so bad where they said, okay, we're leaving. They left, started the AME Church as a result of a white section to sit inside of the church. And so if those issues were not taking place, I don't think that there would have been a need for an all black church. And especially here we are in 2020, still with all black, all white, all Hispanic churches. Now, if you're in an area where it is all white or whatever, we expect your church to be all white. Right. But the way that you can know whether your church can be multicultural is something simple that I was told. And I said, I like that. It's go to your local Walmart. Yep. Go to your local Walmart. If there's blacks, whites, and all kind of folks at the local Walmart, then that shows that your church can be multicultural as well.
Right. That's wow. I love that. Bill, let me ask you, do you have any additional thoughts? And are there like, there's other factors, right? I mean, obviously the only reason the black church exists is not only racism, it is the predominant. Do you have any more thoughts to that you'd want to add?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, historically, there was a time when blacks weren't welcomed to worship at a white church. So, which is crazy. It's like these are supposed to be Christians, but the racism ran that deep. So racism was in the church, the white church. So blacks weren't welcome to come and worship there. So that brought division at that point in time in history. Now, you'd like to think that never existed. Some people pretend as though it never did. But also, I used to be real down on, man, how come we can't find the type of teaching in the Black church we find in the white church? But then I found that Blacks also, this also trickled down into education, where Blacks weren't able to go to your white seminary. So people like Dr. Tony Evans, there were places when he was getting his education and he was not welcome.
Right.
He had to get his somewhere else. And so, and those are things where people say, there's no such thing as systemic. Yeah, there is. Yeah, we're dealing with the fact that for years we didn't have access to what everybody else had access to, but under as Christians, And so what that does, like where I minister, the Black community, there are people that can search out that history and know it. And they're like, no, there's white supremacy is born out of, they start mingling it with Christianity. And so it's a roadblock to the gospel when we're preaching. They're like, no, that's the white man's religion. That's their thing. The slave owners were supposedly Christians, your different groups were supposedly Christians. And so today it's real damaging because now we got white people kind of mixing American and Christian. Oh. And so it's like, just let Jesus be Jesus, because there's obviously a lot of things in America that are not, they're not as warm and welcoming to the people that, if you're not a white man, it's not as wonderful as it is, it's not as wonderful for everybody else, So, I definitely see those challenges.